So we're here today to talk about AI and the problem of AI risk management. So you might, I promise by the end of the week you'll be saying, do I really have to think about AI anymore? It's only 2 letters. How hard can it be, right? But the reality is this is such a novel space, and I've truly been blessed this year to work with incredibly smart people, a working group that we'll talk about in a few minutes, and Jeremy taking the lead for us from an innovation perspective. And I was really gratified last night after our opening sessions that so many of you came up to me either at the sweaty social hour or just during the day, and told me, this is something we're really focusing on and trying to figure out. So it tells us that we're in the right quadrant of the sky, which is always a good thing. And what we hope to do over this session and other sessions today and tomorrow is to put you right on target, so you know where you're going and what the journey ahead looks like for you, and maybe demystify it a bit, because while it is different and interesting and challenging, it is yet another thing that all of you as security and compliance leaders have proven over and over again. You can master the new and the unfamiliar, and you can make it right for your organization. So that's what our goal is today. That's what we want to do here. I am joined by Jeremy, and hopefully by now I don't need to reintroduce myself, but I have all things strategy for HITRUST, partner very closely with Jeremy, who has all things innovation. We are the co-host of the Trust Versus podcast, so if you want to hear interesting guests talk about interesting problems in our space and how we build and sustain trust, you can hear us there. And I think like 65 or 70,000 unique listens, so a lot of you we know are out there, so thank you for listening. And the big thing is to bring really great content to you all and break it down and help educate us first and then the industry second. So on this topic of AI, and specifically AI risk management, we're going to cover 4 things today. So what do we think about when we talk about risk management? And it can be a little confusing as you look at the program we're working on right now with AI assurance, because we're talking about AI risk management, a product that's available today and people are using to really understand the risk management problem. We're going to break that down. And then later today, we're going to talk about AI cybersecurity certification. And I think we'll explain both in this session and in the next session how those things interact. And depending on where you are in your journey, depending on your role, you may be looking at one side of that, you may be looking at both sides of that, or you may be focusing on developing an element of the cybersecurity program while colleagues in the governance space are looking at risk management. Irregardless of that, it goes together. We're going to try to explain to you how that works and why it works. We'll talk about how we do risk management assessments, how we've built the capability with our insights reports and our combined assessment capability to give you those insights. We'll tell you where it came from, how we built it, and why we built it again, and then break down a little bit of the insights report. So the goal of our session is to really demystify this, give you enough ammunition to go home, look at it, start to use it in your organization, and we've designed it very deliberately to be approachable. And my colleagues in business development, I hate to say it this way, it's affordable. It's really designed to be a product that you can take. We know many of you are just trying to get started and figure it out. It's not something you're going to certify your whole organization on at the present time. You just need to know how to demystify it. So we've made it approachable, we've made it affordable, and we've made it available. So those things are valuable. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So when we talk about risk management specifically, Jeremy's my colleague that always has the cool little graphics. I really do like this picture of the guy spinning the plates, and especially this, which is not very stable for me. But anyway, there are these new risks that are coming along because of this thing called AI. I won't ask for a show of hands because I can't see them, but I suspect a number of you are sitting here and you're in organizations that have said, we're doing AI. Your business leaders have started. You may have even put a product in production, and you're probably going, excuse me, wait a minute. What are we doing here about risk, and how are we thinking about security and all the things we care about? And you are not being asked, unfortunately. You are not necessarily always being consulted, unfortunately. Sometimes you're being asked to react to something the business has already decided to do. And it's so interesting. I think Jeremy made a point a while back, is unlike cloud, when we all were going to public cloud, and remember 8 years ago, 10 years ago, this thing called public cloud came on the horizon, AWS, then came Azure, and Google was there with their capabilities, all these other software products that are now kind of software as a service, cloud kind of things. And I know many of you, myself included, I'm like, there is no way I'm putting my protected data for 75 million Americans in somebody else's data center. Not going to happen. Not on my watch. And I was backed by my company. The management team felt the same way. They're like, well, we don't know. We don't know if there's any control. We don't even know how it works. It's the same stuff, but it's got different terminology, and we access it differently, and these public containers make us really nervous, the concept of air gaps, anyway, all that. So it's not a session about cloud security. I'm not going to get into all that, but I love the story because we said no, and we said no for a long time, and then guess what? Our leaders and partners in those companies stepped in and said, oh no, we can do this, and we can do this very well. And you know what? Many of them do it better than any of us could do it individually any longer because they're doing it at scale for thousands of companies every single day. And now we're at this AI thing, and I'm like, it's going to be the same, right? And Jeremy's point is really well made. No, it's not at all, because our businesses went off and bought a relationship through some of these AI providers or a solution that has a significant amount of access to our information, our highly sensitive information, because that's how you train the models. And they're just going because the compelling benefits of it and the opportunity to be the first in the industry or the first consumers to create great value is so huge. So it's very different. We're not saying no, and maybe if we're trying, we're being asked to step aside because this has got to happen. So this risk management thing is very different. So we have to step in, we have to sometimes catch up, or sometimes we're in an organization where we're being asked to be at the table, and you are at the table, and you're saying, okay, let's talk about the risk, let's talk about how we approach those risks, and that's the goal. One of the things I find as well is that risk management leaders often focus on the negative, like how do I prevent a bad thing from happening? And there's actually a greater benefit here, is how do I make sure the good benefits happen right, in the right way. So we're not just managing risk for adverse, or risk to prevent adverse, we're finding ways to be efficient to get to the benefits of AI more quickly and with more structure and governance. So who needs it? Really, any of you that are developing, producing, deploying, or using AI products. Specifically for the risk management solution we've provided, it's for any organization and their governance teams and their security teams that are involved in this use of AI, and they want to understand the use, they want to understand how to govern the risk. So, that's the target. It can be any of you, and I think based on what we're seeing early on with feedback, it will be many of you. So that's a really positive thing. So it's not just about the provider of the system. That's where we're starting with our cybersecurity certifications. So stay tuned for later today. You're going to learn a lot about that. This is really about anybody using AI. So if you just need to make sure your organization is smart about the risk and thinking about managing the risk, this is the stuff that can help you get there, okay? So what's good with me so far? Okay, if you head nods, great. So there's a concept here, and you'll hear it used. It's a little bit of a buzzword at first, but now it's really getting into the lexicon, is we have to think about AI that is trustworthy and responsible in its actions. We had a great breakfast meeting yesterday with some of the CISOs here and CIOs here, talking with Omar Khawaja, who's a good friend of ours and on our board, and he's at Databricks. And the whole conversation was about what must you learn and also unlearn about what you think about IT systems and IT architecture and how these things we do every day work, compliance as well. How do you have to unlearn and learn new things about that for AI? And one of the things that I think very personally is that we put so much autonomy into the fact that AI is going to eat the world or change the world, or some people say destroy life as we know it. I know there's really extreme perspectives on AI, including some of the AI providers who are really talking about being safe with the AI system. AI systems learn from the data we feed them. Human beings have been making decisions that aren't great for the history of our society. We try to be responsible. We work really hard. But if you take all of our decisions we've made over, let's say, the last decade, you feed all that data into an AI system, it will learn the connectivity, the neural network, from its mathematics to simulate outcomes. It will give you outcomes that are not so nice sometimes. And we've all seen the articles about, how AI applied a racial bias to the photographs it generated, or it said really horrible things. Somewhere in our dark parts of our society, human beings have said and published those horrible things, and AI systems have to be responsible in understanding this is not socially correct behavior, and I don't want to hand that back. So you have to be trustworthy and responsible. And you can see those dimensions here. I won't read them to you, but it has everything to do with, privacy, security, safety, explaining how the system operates. That's really important. And that's really the new lexicon we're looking at here. So you have to think about a number of things: the complexity, the transparency of the system, and so forth, as I've already said. So here's a good list of things to think about when you look at risk sources. And so when you say, I'm going to do risk management for AI, you ask these questions, like, have I thought about what's the software development life cycle for AI, and how is it different from our traditional view of building software and putting systems online? And things we've always believed are important, like third-party risk. The AI systems have a supply chain. Often the data you're using is from that supply chain. So make sure it's the right data for the application we're doing. So kind of in summary, we want to think about AI risk management, and we want to acknowledge that it has potential for harm. And I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of lawmaking and regulatory attention on this dimension of AI. It really hasn't gotten deep to the areas that we have focused upon for so long, like cybersecurity, because we're talking so much about making sure AI systems don't do horrible things, like deny a person access to credit, or maybe flag a person as a criminal risk because somewhere in the data set that person's profile looks a little off, and the AI system just repeats that bias, and suddenly now you have a system that's based on automation that decides I can't get a mortgage for my home, or I can't travel because I'm considered a risk to safety on an airliner. Those kind of things could happen if this isn't done right. So harming people as individuals, harming your organization. You build this system that's going to help your customers be so much delighted in how your company interacts with them. And maybe it doesn't answer the question. Maybe it answers the question improperly. Maybe it says something really horrible to your customer because it doesn't like the way the customer prompted the system. These things can happen, and they have happened. And you've seen the stories. So we got to think about those things. And then the ecosystem of just the interconnected world we live in is, if we build an AI system that helps process, medical decisions across a large system of care, that's an interconnected system. Maybe one part of the system goes haywire and now it doesn't work right. And then certainly we burn a lot of electricity. We do a lot of consumption here to build these AI systems. Let's make sure we're smart about using modern technology that's more efficient and more safe and more appropriate for this. So I'll wrap up with this and turn it to Jeremy, who's going to get into the meat of it. But the good news is it's what you've all done for your careers. You've done risk management and so forth. It's the same with different requirements and different considerations. Jeremy's going to take this forward from here and really get into the meat of it. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I found interesting, really digging into the NIST AI risk management framework and ISO 23894, is that the processes describe the motions of going through an AI risk management exercise and really looking at the strengths of an organization doing AI risk management good, and what's missing from organizations that haven't yet got to good on this yet is the process, like the muscle memory needed, is what we're used to already as risk management professionals, especially on the left. That came from ISO 23894. If it sounds familiar, that's great. Like understanding the scope and context and criteria of the problem space, and then doing a risk assessment, and then exploring risk treatment options like mitigation. monitoring and review and recording and reporting and sort of making it a cycle to do it again and repeat process. That sounds very familiar to risk management professionals. The tough part, in my opinion, is understanding how to do those actions against this new technology. And so hopefully that's a bit reassuring to you to say this isn't a very, very big black box hill to climb, because a lot of the actions necessary to get this right are stuff that you and your organizations and your customers hopefully have already done, and it's just actually adding to those processes an additional scope against a new functionality and technology. And so the left process flow comes from ISO 23894, and the right, if it looks familiar, it comes from the NIST AI RMF. So let's talk a bit about the AI risk management assessment and the requirements in the assessment that HITRUST recently released. It's out now as of August, I think. So the idea for this assessment and the reporting from it actually came out of an AI working group. There's a few members here of the working group, very likely include representatives from big cloud providers, Cloudticity, Microsoft AWS, Johnson & Johnson, Optum, and we met very frequently, I think every 2 weeks for about 2 quarters this year, 2 or 3 quarters. We talked a lot about the AI problem space and more than just risk management, AI security and privacy, and a lot of the responsible and trustworthy AI components that you saw in the prior slide, about just acknowledging the shared problem that we all face in the healthcare industry and the IT technology providers that support the healthcare industry, and what, if anything, can HITRUST help with here. And this, what I'm about to talk about, came out of discussions from there. So there's a new assessment, and it's sort of a bolt-on to a HITRUST assessment, E1 or I1 or R2, if you're familiar with those, or it can be done as a self-assessment, where you're able to evaluate adherence to the processes and practices outlined in the NIST AI RMF and ISO 23894. So hear what I'm saying? We didn't make up our own AI risk management content or guidance. Instead, we harmonized widely recognized AI risk management authoritative sources. And we thought this was important because a lot of organizations are going to look to, especially in the US, the NIST AI RMF as the source of really excellent guidance and truth, and the accompanying playbook that NIST released, excellent. And HITRUST has incorporated that guidance and harmonized that instead of trying to take a left turn and build a completely new thing. And it can be performed, again, as an addendum, as an add-on to a HITRUST assessment, or as a targeted assessment, sort of as a standalone. And so if you're in a position where, hey, I realize we have to do this, we want to set down the path, but it need not be validated, like let's not bury ourselves in screenshots and evidence, let's just get to insights faster. You can perform this assessment in MyCSF as sort of a standalone assessment, and it's available as readiness and validated as well. And what's in it? A lot of us from an assessor background or who are with assessor firms think, how many requirements are we talking about? Because then I can sort of understand how big the assessment is. This particular assessment has around 50 requirements. Unsurprisingly, most are in Domain 17, risk management, because that is what we're talking about, risk management. I think my little clicker froze. Okay, so the top one, Domain 1, also focuses on risk management. Those will very likely get moved into Domain 17 later. And my little clicker's frozen, but I can see. Anyway, there's one in vulnerability management that talks about inventorying the AI systems and processes, really the AI systems that are present in the environment, which is great to do anyway, because you can't really understand the risk or secure this system if you don't inventory the AI systems used or deployed by your organization. Oh, here we go, thank you. Not all domains are represented, which is also expected because not all domains have AI specificities, and more importantly, not all assessment domains talk about AI risk management. There's one in Domain 16, which talks about doing a business impact analysis on the AI systems that are out there in your environment to understand if they were to go down or have an availability issue, what would the impact of that be, which is an input into a risk evaluation process, which is really important. And there is, so all in all, less than 50 requirements. So if you think about the size of an R2 assessment, this is much, much smaller than that. And it's designed to be to sort of get you to insights. It's designed to be approachable, and it acknowledges that there's a lot of collective learning that not only the healthcare industry, but all industries adopting new technology have to understand. We focused on risk management as a starting point because we feel that that is so important to really understand where the organizations should really focus their efforts next. We understand cybersecurity is foundational, fundamental, but really this doesn't start with cybersecurity. Instead, this thinks about the entire trustworthy and responsible AI space through a collection of really granular 50 or so requirements. So what's one of these look like? Like this is just an example requirement from domain 17. You'll see it's got 3 evaluative elements, and it says to support the risk management process, we maintain documentation considering this, this, and this. So this is sort of a characteristic of the risk management process that the organization should strive to. And again, this is directly sourced from ISO 23894 and NIST AI RMF. And you'll see where it's placed in the CSF. And there's the mapping to 23894 actually right there. And so hopefully this is just one of around 50, but if you can see the relationship between the mapping and the requirement that we came from it, we've harmonized that mapping into sort of the granular HITRUST language, but we haven't taken a left. We're harmonizers of these sources and acknowledgement of all the great work that NIST and ISO does to create this guidance and to create these standards. So let's talk about some of those sources in more detail. Because I think we did a unique thing here. We combined a few sources instead of just doing a NIST AI RMF-based assessment or just an ISO-based assessment. So early on, ISO 23894 emerged as a really great source of AI risk management guidance. And in it, it states we provide guidance on how organizations that develop, produce, deploy, or use AI systems and services can manage this risk. So we identified it very early as something worthwhile to incorporate into this. And when you read it, you understand it's not meant to be a standalone document. Instead, it itself is an addendum to something called ISO 31000, which is ISO's General Risk Management Guideline. And so because it's an addendum, because it's meant to connect, we incorporated both sources because you can't just do the one, it's part of another, it extends another, right? And then there was no ignoring the NIST AI RMF when it came out, the risk management framework. It is excellent in my opinion, and the opinion of HITRUST is worthwhile. And if you haven't spent time with it, highly recommended you all do. And really, for some of those 50 requirements that are in this assessment, there is a lot of guidance on how to achieve that in either this document or the accompanying playbook that's available online. And they came out like within a month of each other, and they were both great in their own way. So we took both of those sources and 31000, which is part of that family of the ISO ones, and mapped them into CSF version 11.2 as a new risk factor called, unsurprisingly, AI risk management. And 11.2 came out quite a while ago. So it's been around since, I think, October 2023. NIST published a crosswalk between those two documents, and we were able to leverage that crosswalk in the mapping as well. So a lot of things came together to help form this AI risk management factor. And why use both sources? Like, why not just use the NIST source or the ISO source? Well, if you've read it, the NIST AI RMF is objective-based. It's flexible. It's meant to satisfy a lot of different organizations. It's got a really good hierarchy of where to think about the different problems in this problem space. But ISO 23894 is maybe a bit more prescriptive, more actionable. So we felt pairing them together gave you a really robust approach to sort of categorize this content and have that granularity that people look for in HITRUST assessments. So it sort of snapped together really nicely in our opinion. But more importantly, there's different audiences that we're seeking to satisfy. In the US, NIST is very, very popular. Outside the US, not so much. Instead, ISO is looked to much more than NIST. And to satisfy maybe a more globally diverse audience, we felt like having both in there would be especially important. So what does the outcome look like? So if you do this assessment and MyCSF, and you've looked at approximately 50 requirements, and you've got these insights based on sort of critically evaluating your own AI risk management process. What do you get out of this? And so we said, let's not do what we've been doing and sort of just tack it all into the very big HITRUST R2 report or E1 report or I1 report. Instead, this warrants its own specialized deliverable that can sort of translate the outcome of that big combined assessment or that for-purpose assessment and give you the output in the language of these authoritative sources. And so that's what we tried to do with the Insight report. So if you're not familiar, the concept of Insight reports and HITRUST assessments have been around a little while. We rolled out a HIPAA one, so this AI risk management one is not the first. And it strives to sort of be a translation layer. So the concept is you do a HITRUST assessment and you incorporate different compliance factors, authoritative sources into your HITRUST assessment, which you can do because HITRUST has incorporated all these sources through harmonization. It's flexible to meet your needs, right? And so we said, let's take the value of that combined assessment and have sort of a translation layer. Let's have the assessment results communicated to relying parties that need to be spoken to in the language of that authoritative source, and have a standalone report, which would help educate that relying party about HITRUST if they're not familiar with it, and also speak in that language. And that was the sort of the genesis of Insight reports. So we had launched the HIPAA one, and PHIPAA, which is Ontario, Canada's healthcare regulation, came out concurrent with this one. But this one is part of that family of Insight reports meant to provide that easy to understand communication of the assessment results against these sources. It's not a certification, it's a point-in-time report, and it's meant for that transparency. Let's communicate it really clearly by doing that translation. And uniquely, I think, like different from a management report that you might get from a consulting organization, this can be communicated to internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, like key customers, if necessary. And there's several different sections. It's kind of not nearly as long as you want, but too long to walk through here. Like not as long as the very big HITRUST R2, E1, I1. Too long to walk through here. Maybe one of the more unique things about this are the scorecards, which I've got some screenshots of. So you sort of get a red, yellow, green snapshot of each section of both authoritative sources, the NIST and the ISO, to see where your areas of focus should be to shore up process gaps in your risk management process. It's also got a list of broken out sort of identified observations that are relevant to that assessment and really detailed mappings. So every single assessment requirement of those 50, you can see the mappings to both authoritative sources as a collection. And really that's the bulk of the report right there, that mapping section. It's very transparent. So if you're curious, like, hey, was this considered about the risk identification process? NIST says you should do it, and the AI RMF, you can zoom in and really figure out which assessment results or requirements map to that. And yeah, the scorecards, here's the one example for NIST AI RMF. You'll see it's organized by sort of govern, map, manage, just the AI risk management chunks and the sections. And again, it's sort of a scorecard, a little snapshot against that NIST one. And then here's an example. ISO 23894 So if there was an observation that came out of the assessment process against maybe the evaluation part 5 of ISO 23894, it might be red or yellow to identify areas of focus to shore up that risk management process. And again, you'll notice if you look at some of the sections, this is not a risk assessment, right? You still have to do a risk assessment as part of the risk management umbrella. But this is actually bigger than that. Instead, this says we have this risk management process that considers identifying risk, assessing risk, mitigating risk, monitoring our risk mitigation and treatment decisions, and doing it circularly. So the assessment's part of it. You still have to do that separate from this. This says here's how you should extend your risk management program to incorporate the AI specificities, acknowledging those unique sources of AI risk that Robert mentioned earlier. So it's not a risk assessment. It tells you how to guide your risk management efforts in a much larger way than just a risk assessment. And if you've seen this slide before, this is sort of directionally where we're going with the AI assurances, is you can tack on to an E1 or I1 or R2 this AI risk management factor that I've just talked about. That includes the 23894 and NIST AI RMF, and optionally AI security, which I'll talk about a little later today, and get multiple assessment reports from this. And if you're familiar with HITRUST, we've said it for a very long time, assess once, report many. Have you heard that? Assess once, report many. And for a long time, that meant let's do one assessment and satisfy many audiences with the assessment result, with the assessment report. One assessment, satisfy many relying parties. That's still true, but now we've sort of explored the other side of assess once, report many. That says let's do one assessment and get many different reports to satisfy those stakeholders that need to be spoken to in the language that they understand, or to be targeted in a way that the key message isn't sort of diluted by the rest of the insights throughout the E1, I1, or R2. So this is the other side of assess once, report many, looked at through the lens of AI assurance. You'll notice down at the bottom left, it mentions that this will be supported by the cloud and AI shared responsibility models and matrices. There's a session later today where I talk about how HITRUST is expanding our shared responsibility and inheritance program to consider the specificities of AI, and we dive deep into the Microsoft shared responsibility model and some of the key concepts in AI shared responsibility. So if you're interested at all about that, that's about an hour, and we'll go deep into that whole concept, which is so critical, in my opinion, to AI assurance and AI security assurance specifically. More information, there's several things you should look at. We've got an example of one of these AI risk management reports, actually two examples, one based on a validated assessment, and another based on that targeted sort of self-assessment, available on our help site. As the full example PDF you could check out and sort of see the language in the preamble and explaining how we use two different sources and why. There's also guidance on how to get to these approximately 50 AI risk management requirements on our website, on our AI Hub, and there's also the link to our AI Hub.